You can never isolate your child or yourself because it's never going to happen. So we live in a world where there's good and bad, and resilience is something that's naturally in us. So yes, we don't want our children and ourselves to go through bad stuff, but it's inevitable. So in order to cope with the bad stuff of life that will inevitably happen, we need to be able to unlock and open that door of resilience.
I have brought on the perfect person to really unpack a lot of what is actually on our minds, our brain health. And she is the foremost leading expert in neuroscience as a cognitive neuroscientist with a PhD in communication pathology, specializing in neuropsychology. It is the one, the only Dr. Caroline Leaf.
That's what the NeuroCycle does. The NeuroCycle is that process. It's that process of helping you help yourself as a parent recognize your behaviors, your emotions, your perspectives, your bodily sensations. What does that mean? What is it attached to? What's the source? It's an understanding, okay, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I may not be able to fix it, but I can see that that's the source of the issue.
She talks about a principle called NeuroCycle, and we're going to get into that in this conversation. We talk about how we can help understand the epidemic of anxiety and ADHD in children, and it's actually not what you think. How to cope and safely introduce phones and screens to kids no matter what the age is, the difference between helicopter parenting and safety net parenting, why sometimes our feelings and feeling those feelings is not a good thing, and how to have mind over matter and emotional regulation.
So to try and help a parent to have a collaborative relationship with yourself and your child and understand that you really are the best model for your child. The best way for you to help your child is for you to demonstrate how you're helping yourself.
Where did the early beginnings of Dr. Caroline Leaf, where did her interests lie to be able to now create this mission and movement helping other people?
Oh, well, thank you for asking such a great question, for having me on your show. Basically, from a little girl, I had a fascination with medicine, with the brain, and I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and I got into medicine, and I was going to do full-on neurosurgery, and then I actually had an opportunity to do a degree that they had just started, which was a combination of medicine, psychology, communication pathology. It was a BSc-related type of degree, and it exposed, it was an experimental degree where they took various different combinations and built a sort of 7-year program into 4 years. And there were very few of us because it was very mentored type training. And I thought, okay, well, let me try and get in because it sounds great and I can always go back to surgery. And I got in and did the degree, and I was sold on, first of all, it was 7 days a week. And I remember thinking, gosh, I'll tell everyone, do not do this because it's so consuming. But the experience really stimulated me. It exposed me to so many different ideas and combinations. And I'm in the field of psychoneurobiology, mind, brain, body. And if I didn't have that grounding, if I just did medicine, I would have had a very biomedical approach. And if I just did psychology, which is, that's a very narrow approach, I was very fortunate to have this very strong combination, and also, deeply spiritual. And so all of this combination together stimulated me. So in my degree, my research, I was sitting in a lecture. This is back in the 80s. I've been in the field nearly 40 years now, so it's a long time. And back in the 80s, they didn't there was a philosophy that the mind and the brain were separate, but that the brain couldn't change. Now the philosophy shifted to where there's a debate whether the mind and brain are separate or whether it's the same thing. The majority of people think the mind and the brain are the same thing, which is incorrect, and we can talk about that. But what's interesting is that the philosophy at the time was, it was very clear that the mind and the brain were separate, but the brain, they believed the brain couldn't change. And we were having this neuroscience, neurology lecture, and they were going on about how when your brain's damaged, it can't change. And I remember putting up my hand and questioning this. And the lecturer was, male, woman. I'm a woman in science in the 80s. And I challenged this. I said, but why, if our mind is changing, our experiences of life, we're never the same as humans, how can it not change the brain? And the professors basically said, well, go do research. And, me innocently as a student thought that they were just throwing out a challenge. And I took the challenge, and they were being kind of facetious, oh gosh, don't even ask that question. And I did, and I started researching, and actually the professor was great because I said, well, where should I do the research? What area? And he said, in brain damage, traumatic brain injury, because there's no research. So once again, it was a bit of a skewed challenge, but I did. And the reason I'm telling you such an elaborate story is that it was that field where they didn't believe a brain, that time, They didn't believe a brain could change. And they said to me, go research something in a field that had no research or had very little research. And I did. And I saw that when you change your mind, or when you direct your mind, you're going to change how you function behaviorally, cognitively, emotionally, academically, socially, and your brain will change. So I did some of the earliest work in neuroplasticity in the field. And from there, it just escalated. 38 years later, I run a research team. We're still doing research. We still publish, working on psychoneurobiology, habit formation, all kinds of amazing stuff. I practiced for 25 years. I don't practice anymore, but I took all of that research, all the clinical experience, and basically put that into books. And we have a mental health technology platform.
Yes, you were saying that before we just got on. What is the technology platform?
Okay, so basically the NeuroCycle is a system that I developed based on research working initially with people with traumatic brain injury and then dementias and stroke and heart attack and extreme emotional trauma, learning disability, all these things, where I was trying to find a way of how could we direct our mind to change the brain for better and therefore improve how we function. So that created I created a theory, and then out of the theory, a system, because theories are no good unless you can actually have something that you can do with them. So the NeuroCycle is birthed out of that, a lot of clinical and academic research, and is very practical. And I started using it with my patients and helping them improve how they functioned academically, cognitively, and all that stuff. And then I saw, hey, this is something I need to use just to manage my own life day to day and traumas and so on. And so I started playing around with that and with family, and then it basically grew into a whole research system. And all it is a way, when I say all it is, it's a very scientifically based way that you can direct your mind. So it's actually really easy to apply. It's really easy to apply, to understand the concept, and easy to apply if you discipline yourself, because it's not something that you can just do once and it works for you.
Sure.
So in a world where we told, quick fix mentality, take a pill, do a bit of meditation, but the whole concept of managing yourself mentally over time is something that people don't really like to do because it's uncomfortable being depressed or anxious or worked up or stressed out or burnt out or overthinking, or it's very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So we look for comfort quickly. And also we have a current messaging that's very strong in our current zeitgeist of, well, if I have some kind of emotion like depression or anxiety, I must have a chemical imbalance or a mental illness. And that's grown out of a 40-year incorrect and disproved scientific philosophy that when we battle as humans, it's coming from our brain or a brain disease, when actually it's coming from adverse experiences of life and how we are responding. So basically,
and I want to stop you right there, because there's so many listeners that when they come to the Brave Table, they've either gone through a challenge, they've gone through an adversity, and a lot of the work that I've been interested in so long, which is why we were so excited to have you on, is the intersection of resilience, adverse and trauma moments in life. But more specifically, now that I've become a mom, is trauma or adverse experiences, is that good for the brain for our children to build resilience? And how much of it is a good thing?
Okay, so it's not about us, it's about us in the world. So you can never isolate your child or yourself, because it's never going to happen. So we live in a world where there's good and bad. And resilience is something that's naturally in us. So in our wired for love nature, so in our mind, brain, body, which is our psychoneurobiology, which is what the NeuroCycle helps to activate and direct. Okay, so we can come back to the NeuroCycle once I've answered this question, if you'd like to, because I didn't fully explain. I don't want to leave people hanging. But to show how the NeuroCycle links to resilience, we as humans in our brain and our body and our mind, and mind being separate from brain, mind being an energy force that basically drives the mental aspects of our functioning, so how we respond to life, and our physiology, heart beating, brain working, blood flowing, all that stuff. It's all driven by mind, because when you're dead, all of that disintegrates. So mind is this life force, and it enables us to have this conversation, enables us to breathe, just for simple argument's sake. Mm-hmm. So part of what we see as scientists is that our brain and body and mind are all wired for resilience resilience, for survival, for being able to bounce back, to be able to like there's no cell or it's intracellular something inside the cell or subatomic particle or any part of our brain or body that is or mind that is designed for negativity or negativity bias or brokenness. Everything is for survival. So yes, we have damage and things, and we have genetics that come through and all that stuff, but essentially everything about how we function is to try and overcome and be resilient. But the way to sharpen or to think of resilience as this unlimited driving formula of our mind, brain, body connection as humans, but it's something that has to be unlocked. It's unlimited, but it can get locked up. So if you think of a door that opens to infinity, you know, those lovely visuals that we often see in movies and things like that. That's a great way to visualize resilience. And in our children, right from very young, we are helping them to open that door. And the way the door opens is through life's inevitable adverse experiences. And yes, we don't want our children and ourselves to go through bad stuff, but it's inevitable. So in order to cope with the bad stuff of life that will inevitably happen, we need to be able to unlock and open that door of resilience. And so the work that I've done is to help people to understand resilience and understand how it's unlocked, which is through the mind. So how we see things, how we think about things, which is our mind, how we think and feel and choose is going to either close the door or only open it a crack, or keep it only tiny bits filtering through and closing and filtering through and closing, which is that feeling of it's limited. I'm running out of resources. And there's a very strong messaging in social media and in books and in the world of psychiatry and medicine that we are fallible, that we are weak, that we once broken, we're always broken, and that's not true. But that is the messaging our alpha generation and a lot of our Gen Z have grown up with. Millennials not as much, but it's still a strong message there. And that is not the truth. And so we see, for example, that our younger generation, your children's age, my children are in their 30s, 20s and 30s. Your children are just toddlers and 2 and 5 years of age. I have a grandchild who's just 7 months old. This generation is growing up with a message that we need to counter as leaders and parents, which is, oh, if you feel bad, that's bad. There's something wrong with you. Let's quickly suppress it. Let's quickly get rid of it. And if a child is battling a little bit at school, immediately a parent is told there's something wrong with your child. So the child's getting this message that if I get bullied and I feel sad and I shout at that bully, I'm being told I've got a problem. There's something wrong with me as an individual, or I'm not good enough, or there's my mother's worried or my father's worried. There's something wrong with me. So because of their children are very, very insightful, but they don't yet have the wisdom fully developed. So if something goes wrong in their life, they recognize and something's going wrong around them or happening to them, they have the insight to recognize that there's something wrong, but they don't have the tools yet to verbalize. So it'll come out with behavioral issues or emotional things or whatever. And then instead of us processing and understanding the context and the story, which is how I was trained, which is how we should be handling it, our current model is, oh my gosh, there's a problem. Your child's got ADHD, or your child's got this, or your child's got that. And it's siphoned off into a biomedical model label. And that caused a lot of problems, and that stifles resilience, that closes that door, and it sends the message to the child that we need to the parent, that we need to helicopter parent in order for a child to survive. Meanwhile, we should not helicopter parent, we should safety net parent to activate resilience.
So safety net parent versus helicopter parent. So they can scrape their foot, they can have the heartbreak, they can not win the trophy.
Exactly.
And well, in one of the books that, obviously you just shared, but is one of the reasons why I think has been sparking a lot of this dialogue, and I'm so excited we're going to get into it, How to Help Your Child Clean Up Their Mental Mess, a guide to building resilience and managing mental health. Well, with the rise of, what you just shared now, with the rise of ADHD, those diagnoses are probably the highest ever for children, as well as anxiety in children post-COVID. What are you seeing now?
Okay, so coming back to, I want to build a little bit of hope in people in answering that question. Okay, so first of all, ADHD is a term that in the early 80s was put forward as a very unresearched label. And it was seen as sort of, it's a set of behaviors that people that of any age can show. But the context is very important. So if a person is showing those types of behaviors, we always need to look at the context. Why? What's going on? And there's always a whole story behind it. If we just look at the behaviors, however, as a set of symptoms, and we don't describe the behaviors as behaviors in terms of context. So two different things, behaviors in terms of context or symptoms in terms of a medical label. There's two ways of looking at it. The one way is going to create a lot of problems because literally everyone can get that label. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing concept creep. We're seeing that not only are children sometimes as young as infants being labeled, and people now, there's a big move to talk about late onset ADHD. So it's become a catch-all, and it's very worrying because 30 years ago, I was in a lecture at one of these lectures where they were setting up this label, where they actually said, this is going to be a problem. The set of behaviors that's useful to describe is going to turn into a diagnosis that's going to cause problems. And 30 years, here we're sitting 45 years later, and that is exactly, or 40 years later, that's exactly what has happened. So first of all, if anyone's listening and your child or you have been labeled with ADHD, let's take the word label away, throw it away, and let's take the word diagnosis away. Because if we take the words label and diagnosis are very scary. They mean that there's a problem in my brain or my child's brain. And the minute you say that to anyone, there's an anxiety of, oh gosh, this is a problem that needs medical attention, and I feel a little hopeless. On the one hand, there's a sense of relief because, that explains what's going on. So let's talk about the relief aspect. The relief aspect is because it's actually giving you names for behaviors. The scary part is that, oh gosh, it's the brain, I can't do anything. So let's take the scary away and say, hey, you can do something. It's not a label, it's not a diagnosis, because a diagnosis implies, like if you get diagnosed with diabetes, we know that there is a test you can run. There's symptoms we can actually, from the test, we can see things, and we can then target the pancreas with insulin. Very specific. That's what diagnosis implies. When it comes to ADHD, when it comes to bipolar, when it comes to anxiety, you can't do that. There is no test that does that. There is no underlying neurobiological or chemical dysfunction. That's what's been 95% of people think that's the case, but that's been disproved. So it's more like it's been used to explain, and it's incorrect information. So what happens is that if a child has a context and a set of experiences, like maybe being bullied at school, maybe moving home, maybe changing schools, maybe parents going through divorce, maybe just backing a little bit with a few things, maybe they have got a bit of a concentration issue. And if that is not managed properly, that's labeled and diagnosed and medicated, it becomes a problem that's quite hard to solve. But if we try and take the child and look at the child in context of what's going on in their life and support the parent and work as a whole team to find the story and give coping skills and self-regulation, co-regulation, all these kinds of things to help the parent, then, and the school, whatever the child, then we change the picture from being one of a scary medical disease to one of something that's happening that we can learn to manage and change, because the brain is always changing, because the mind is always changing. So something happens to us, like the bullying, like the change of school, like the divorce, that is an experience that goes into your mind, brain, and body, and does change your mind, brain, and body. It grows in the network physically as protein structures. And if it's a toxic experience, like maybe a divorce that affects the child, that is a toxic experience that does change the brain. But the cause is not the brain. The result is in the brain and the body and in the mind. The experience is in the environment. So what we have to do is we have to understand the source of where it came from. And in doing that, we can actually change what that looks like inside the mind, brain, and body, and then therefore change how the child is showing up, or how you're showing up in life. And that's what the NeuroCycle does. The NeuroCycle is that process. It's that process of helping you help yourself as a parent recognize your behaviors, your emotions, your perspectives, your bodily sensations. What does that mean? What is it attached to? What's the source? You can't always fix it. Why does someone bully someone? Why does someone abuse someone? Why does that happen? But it's an understanding, okay, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I may not be able to fix the bully, but I can see that that's the source of the concentration issue. Therefore, how do I manage this bullying situation so my child can concentrate better? So that's the influence and that's what the neurocycle helps you to do. It helps you to find the source, deconstruct and reconstruct. So you can't change the story of the bully. You can't fix the bully, but you can fix the impact on you and therefore change how it's going to play out into your future and your child's future. Does that make sense?
Okay, so this is so fascinating. So I want to recap for everybody who's getting this neuroscience 101, you know, or 130. But so we need to find the actual the concentration, the story that we are telling our brains. And it could be the bully, the heartbreak, the divorce, the separation, etc., the unexpected expectation that didn't go well. So find that, and then really that's where you enter in the coping tools and the coping mechanisms so we can create a new story.
Absolutely. So your old story will never go away because you'll never forget the bullying. You'll never forget that your parents got divorced. You'll never forget that you were maybe abused in a work environment. You'll never forget that you maybe didn't get enough love as a child because your mom had to work because you didn't have enough finances and you weren't whatever. But that impact, you need to honor yourself to recognize what that source was and the impact it had on your life. It doesn't mean you blame. That doesn't help anyone. I'm not saying that if you're a victim of abuse, there is blame involved. But, you're talking about like if a mom had to go to work because she couldn't afford something versus if your mother physically abused you. We're talking things, but at the end of the day, you still can't fix you change the fact that your mother abused you or hopefully didn't, but I'm giving extreme situations, or that your mother had to go to work. That story will always remain, but the impact on you're entitled, entitled's a terrible word. You're allowed.
You're in the driver's seat.
You're in the drive. Yeah, you're allowed to say, hey, that really affected me in this way, in this way, in this way. So what can I do to change how that's impacting me? Because I see it filtering into my relationship with my friends or my relationship with my partner, or as a child, your child's relationship with their friends, or your child's attachment to you, or whatever. And we can help a child as young as 2 start recognizing this. My youngest patients were 2 and 3 years of age. And so this is a skill this is why I wrote this book now at this point, because I've been watching this 38, 40 year down thing that's happening in mental health, where I've seen our children's resilience being the door closed on their resilience. Yeah. And it really has worried me. And the pressure on parents to become almost forced into helicopter parenting just to survive you're a bad parent if you're not doing all these things for your child. I mean, it's frightening, and the tremendous pressure on all these different parenting styles and that kind of thing. So it's to try and help a parent to have a collaborative relationship with yourself and your child, and understand that you really are the best model for your child. The best way for you to help your child is for you to demonstrate how you're helping yourself. And by that, I mean, let's say that you have an inevitable bad day. I mean, having a business, running a business, or working and having 2 small toddlers in your house, it's not a joke. It's wonderful, but it's really hard work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of chaos and mess and mental mess.
Totally, that's okay. And it's allowing yourself to lose it a little bit. Maybe you got frustrated and you yelled at your kids, and yes, maybe you did make them cry, and maybe you did kick a toy, and maybe you did say something you wish you didn't say. But it's instead of going into parent guilt, which we do, and I've done, we can model a process of resilience activation by having an area in our home that I love to call the NeuroCycle area. Kids love big words. Even your ones, they love brain, neurocycle, mind. You'll be amazed at how kids will hook onto those kinds of words. And what I recommend, and I'm going to set the scene, and then I can tell the story if you want.
Yes, of course.
So I recommend that if you've got young children and even teenagers, identify an area in your house that's a safe space. Not that there isn't safe space. I'm not saying that there's no safe space, but a place where you can really offload and be your messiest self. And that could be a corner. If you have a corner of your house that you could allocate, you could maybe put a paint chalkboard on the wall so the kids can write, and you have a thing of chalk, or put a whiteboard or white chalk, or big notepads, a nice big basket with toys and Lego and We've got this little brainy character to help children, the brainy characters throughout the books. We've got the toy, we've got a coloring book. Have a box where you've got the toolkit. There's a whole toolkit.
I love this. We're going to have to link that in the show notes.
For the mom, the NeuroCycle,
Mom and the kids.
Just the app, because in the app there's also a whole parenting application. I can show you that in a moment. Have a corner in your house where there's maybe a nice bean bag, where there's a comfortable chair, where there's a flowers, where you as a family create the space, which is our special space. And mom, dad, everyone, partner, everyone uses that. And then let's let's come back to the scenario. So now this place is set up. It's a little NeuroCycle center, it's our safe center, it's our messy center. It's where whatever works for you as a family. And you yell at your kids because you're doing a podcast and they keep coming in and worrying you and you have to stop the podcast and they were just whatever. And you said things and you had to go back and smile and do the podcast. And then you went out guilt and you know all that stuff. And so now you go out, you finish the podcast and you go to this little area and you call your kids over and you say, and you now work through a NeuroCycle. You sit down, then you say, oh my gosh, I feel so bad or guilty, whichever word's age appropriate. So you first label your emotion. Say a sentence, I feel so bad and so sad or whatever. And you can even say, I got so mad and that's why I feel sad. And then your behavior, I shouted at you and I said things that I shouldn't have. And I pushed you a bit because you were coming in my podcast room. And so behavior. And that made me and that made my body like this, and I got an ugly face. And and I mean, I'm being real. I'm a mom, you know. I did this, and your perspective, the fourth one, perspective. So it's 4 signals: emotions, body sensation, behavior, and perspective. And I thought, oh no, this is happening again because you worried me before, and that made me feel. That's no excuse for me saying what I did, but that's what happened. And then you go to the next step and you say, why? Why did I do that? Because that's my space. That's where I work. This is what, you need to respect that this is mom's work. This is what I do. This is how we have the toys that we have and the food that we have, whatever. So there's a reflection and an explanation. And then you go to if you've got a whiteboard behind you with a chalkboard, or you take a piece of paper, and depending on age, if they still not writing, you're going to do mainly drawings, or if they're writing, you can do a combination of drawings and writing, and you start creating in a tree-like structure. So you draw in the middle, you draw like a face, maybe that's an upside down smile, or whatever. If you're an artist, draw great drawings or whatever. So you draw that. You can maybe draw a face and a podcast mic, and in the middle. And then you can draw a line coming out of that, and you can draw those 4 things. The first line could just be, you draw a line, and then at the end, maybe a shouting mouth, and maybe waving arms. And you could also add some words, and even if they're not reading yet, though it's good for them to start seeing words. So it's also helping with reading. So there's a lot of things, and there's a million things. I'm telling you a lot in once, but there's
no, I love this. But is this kind of like a mind map? So you can have a visual representation for the child, tween, adult, teenager. Exactly. Yes, so that they can also comprehend what you've just shared.
The mind map, but it's more. It's called a metacog. And metacog, which is such a cool word and kids love it. And metacog is something I've researched for all these years as well. And it's basically a mind map takes around about 1 to 5% of the content. And it's too little for our brain to really get deep. And a metacog takes you to the 15 to 35%. So what we know from neuroscientific research is if you really want to get to the core of the issue, or if you really want to learn something new or really unlock the resilience, we need to try and capture around 15 to 35% of content, which is really cool to know. So what does that look like? In a sentence, it's about 30% of a sentence. So if you take a really simple sentence, the cat sat on the mat, it's going to be cat sat mat. So I'm just giving you points of reference. So it's not, you don't have to write every word. It's about 30%, of 15 to 30% of what you have said. So you're going to draw a few pictures, a few words. So you're going to basically, you're going to draw your emotions, your behaviors, your perspectives, your bodily sensation. And it could be simple, combination of words. You can use dramatization. You pick up at Brainy and you can demonstrate Brainy's tummy was sore when it happened. It's a mixture of dramatization and visualization. That's the metacog. So that's step 3. Mm-hmm. At this stage, your kids are engrossed. At this stage, you've invited collaboration, which is what you want. But you're not putting anything on them, you're putting it all on you and you're modeling. And then you're saying, and our 4th step is what we call the recheck, what I call the recheck. And that is where you reconceptualize. Okay, this is what happened. This is what happened. This is why it happened. Now, what can we do about it? you invite them, and they, you'll
And this is almost like a conflict repair, or
yes,
we get
yes.
to come up with solutions so that it doesn't
And
happen again.
exactly. And if it does happen again, we can remember, because we're going to learn. It's going to take time to learn, but we've started the process. So it could be something as simple as, your 2-year-old will probably come up and say, "Don't worry, mommy," and touch your face, knowing what a 2-year-old will do. Your 5-year-old, I think your
Yes,
2-year-old
I have a 2 and then a 5. Yeah.
and your 5-year-old will probably go and start drawing immediately and start saying, and they'll probably say, "It's okay, mommy, we love you," whatever. And that you will find that between the three of you, you'll work out some sort of solution. And then, so it's like a reorganizing. What happened? What can we do? And it leads to some sort of summarization. Then we say, okay, action. What do we do in future? So what's our plan? When mom's in the studio and the door's closed, what are you going to do? You're not going to come inside. You're going to go to whoever's looking after them to go and read the story or whatever. So you come up with an action plan, and then you kind of end off the thing by saying, well, let's now go and read a book or bake a cake or whatever. I don't have a cookie, go for a walk with the dog, whatever. So you do something to close. So you've gone through 5 steps. The first one is gather awareness of your emotions, your behaviors, your bodily sensations, and your perspectives. Then you reflected. Then you captured in the visual dramatization. Obviously, when you're dealing with a teenager, you could do this on paper, in the app. The app, you can actually do this in the app.
Oh my gosh.
For your teenager, if anyone from 11, 12 onwards can work in the app.
What's the name of the app?
The app is called NeuroCycle, and I'm going to show you what it looks like, and we'll send you the link. So it's
yes, we'll put all of that in the show notes as well.
See, on my phone, it's the little N. Can you see? And then in it, you'll see there's, oops, I got to hold this correctly. The big bar in the middle is.
Oh, I think that's brilliant.
Cycle, and then there's this 5-step process. I've described you using the 5-step process one situation, but if you've got a pattern in your child's life, for example, that there's a trauma and you're seeing a consistent pattern, wherever there's a pattern, patterns are habits. Habits take 63 days to change. Yep. So the green block is taking you through those 5 steps in a very guided way through 63 days. It's just a few minutes a day.
And I think this is so brilliant, because I think, we never had this growing up.
Exactly.
And I think for those people who, maybe if they're, obviously if they're watching this or on YouTube or listening to this, they are book people, but some people are not. And I'm so glad that you have an app.
In the book. So if people want to just do it in the book, it's in the book. So this is how you help your child, and then this is how you help yourself. So they're 2 books. But I mean, a lot of parents are using this for inner child work. A lot of adults have pulled this book out for inner child work.
Right.
So it's just the NeuroCycle in such a simple way that, so you can pair them. And even in the app I have, if you need to decompress, there's decompression guides. Like if there's a major, sometimes you just got to decompress before you can do anything. There's mini neurocycles. Like if you have a toxic situation at work or in a moment, that's an in the moment neurocycle. And there's for parents. There's a whole thing for parents over here.
Oh my gosh, I love this, Caroline. This is brilliant. And I want to I want to segue, because I know that our time is running out, and I want to segue into probably one of the most important conversations. And I've heard you share some of this even on your Instagram online about where we are going with the amount of, the anxiety that we have with our kids, the ADHD that you've now kind of dismantled, and knowing that our kids are not problems, but then we add a very important factor, social media. And I know that we're starting to have these conversations in our house. My son is 5. And I know that other moms write in, friends, etc. This is a big struggle for a lot of families. What can parents do to really equip themselves, and even after their kids are online, if they see these patterns or behaviors of their young teenager, tween, how to rectify the inevitable, and how can we be equipped as parents to really dive into all of the things that we probably, there's no going back to where we didn't have phones. I mean, I don't know, but
I know it's a huge question and a fantastic question, and I wish we had 5 hours to unpack it because that's literally what we need. But the high level is to, first of all, the concept of mind management and self-regulation, which is pretty much what this whole interview's been about. This whole neurocycle, this whole mind brain, all this stuff is actually the whole thing is I want to empower you to help yourself so that you can teach your child to help themselves. Be empowered to recognize when something's throwing me off and what do I do about that. So the best way to handle the cell phone thing is to embrace it. It's part of our life. AI is part of our life. This is a reality. And what happens is that every generation has to deal with some new reality. And instead of being scared, what we need to be, we need to turn our fear into awareness. And that awareness should increase our mind management desire. And that will activate resilience. So what I mean by that is that we need to recognize if it's with us, how do we manage it? So what's the good? What's the bad? What's the ugly? And you're going to have to teach your kids that by modeling and by helping them to recognize. So if your child does have a little bit of unfettered access to the phone as a little bit of an experiment. So here's an experiment you can do. This may be the easiest way to understand it. Control it for a while. So say we're not using the phone at dinner, or I know your kids are still young, but I can see with my 7-month grandchild, she learned to crawl to the phone. We put the phone there and she was at the phone. And she'll talk to me on FaceTime every day when I'm not with her. So this is the reality for my 7-month-old grandchild. Yeah. So what we want to do is do some sort of an experiment. We want to show them that this is a great tool. I can talk to Granny. I can watch something fun. I can learn something educational. I can connect with my friends. I can get the social media, the support that a teenager needs. They need that support in that texting thing. There's a lot of healthy stuff happening there. But, okay, so unfettered access. Let them experience, maybe do 2 days or 1 day, whatever you come, or a week, where you don't control it.
Okay.
And then say, okay, now, or you could start with control. I would say uncontrolled first. Do uncontrolled first.
My anxiety level's going up right now, Dr. Caroline.
No, do the controlled first then.
Okay.
And when they get the uncontrolled, they go to really do the uncontrolled, and that's what you want to see. So the control will be, look, we only have this at this time, we're limiting the time, which is what we should do, but that's coming from external control, you telling them. Okay. And then you've got to model that. You've got to make sure that your use of the phone is under control and allow them to say, hey, Mom, you've just been on your phone. Mom, you are on your phone and it's dinner. And Mom, why aren't you listening to me? Dad, you're on your phone. You want to get them to encourage you. So two-way street. Then try a week or a few days where it's unfettered control, where all of you just do whatever you want with the phone. Now, you're going to get the quicker results with your teenagers, your tweens, and that kind of thing, and even your 19, 11, 12-year-olds, because we know as early as even 4 and 5 children are being influenced by body image issues, suicide, etc., because all of these messages are coming through. So if you're not comfortable doing this for a week, do it for 2 days. Do whatever works for you. Don't even have to do it. I'm just giving you an option. And what the point being is that I want you to see that I want them to feel something negative. I want you to feel something negative. And that negativity, but it's controlled. So you see a change in behavior. You see with it controlled is frustration, but you're having good conversations. At mealtimes, there's a little bit of frustration and irritation, but you get through it. You somehow talk it through and don't suppress. Talk things through. Do your little NeuroCycle corner. Talk through, this is frustrating me. I wanted to talk to my friend then. Don't talk it. Be open. Right. With the unfettered control, within limits, talk as well. Go into the NeuroCycle corner and just say, okay, I've noticed that your sleeping's got worse. I've noticed that you're suddenly swearing a lot. I noticed that you're saying bad words that you never used to say. I noticed that you're really sad at lunchtime when I fed you. I noticed that you're going in your room more. I noticed that you're not eating as much. I notice, so in other words, and do you, so you observe, I'm observing, do you agree? So, and in the safe space, always do this kind of hard work in that safe space which is the NeuroCycle corner, whatever you call it, where they can say whatever they want to say, obviously within limits. They're not going to scream and shout and swear at you and that kind of thing. And if they do, we just say, look, this behavior is not, allowed. I understand this is not who you are. I understand that this is you're saying these words and you're doing these things because of something, but still that's not allowed. So, be careful of not taking gentle parenting to the extreme where you can actually grow a brat in your house. So, seriously. We always want to give reasons, because every time a child does something, there's always a reason. And very often it's them crying out and saying, why? Help me. I need to get your attention. They don't want to child isn't trying to be a bad person. They're not trying to irritate you. They're trying to learn something. And if we can get through, look, we don't hit our brother. We need, that's I understand you're frustrated, but first you say sorry. First you recognize you don't hit your brother. Okay, let's talk about why you hit your brother. What was going on? Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
So you want to see that unfettered access to social media, how it changes and creates patterns. And that's why I said about a week, because it is going to take that long to see a change in a pattern.
Wow. So, and I really think this is amazing, because it's a controlled environment, just like you're a researcher, but we get to control these parameters so that our kids can push the envelope, so we can see, and then we can actually repair, come back together, have a neurocycle moment of teaching and learning with it.
And you can say something like, I noticed that you're not eating suddenly, or you're picking at your food. Is there something on social media? Can you, you got to be you want to, from as young as possible, be as open as possible. You want your child to come to you with the hard questions of sex and life and not eating and bad words and bad things happening. You want them to come to you to talk about them and not to feel judged. You want to keep that open doorway. You've got to learn to keep that that straight face and that kind of stuff, and so they feel safe telling you stuff. And it isn't going to be easy, but it's really important for parenting. So that's when you start saying to your child things like, I've noticed this, I'm not judging you, but is it maybe that you've been watching on social media, you've been following someone on social media, and because there is a lot on social media about people wanting to look very thin and not eating, and that's the mean girl group, and if you want to be part of the mean girl group, you've got to be thin, and if you're not as thin, you're not going to be accepted. Is there maybe, were you following a few of those profiles? Were you in their feed and listening to all their comments? Were they maybe speaking to you? Did they maybe text you? Because remember, our phone is changing the length of time that a child's being bullied. So bullying without the phone era, it's ended when they came home from school. Now if the phone is with them, they've been bullied right up until they go to sleep. And then they wake up and they see texts. So this is what I'm saying. Does that make sense? I'm trying to give you and that way you can work out parameters, and you teach your child to recognize, oops, when I feel like this, when I start doing these things, when I feel this in my body, when the way I look at life perspective starts shifting, something's not right. Maybe it's that social media profile. Maybe it's that person I've been speaking to. Maybe I need to talk to my mom and dad and say, this person keeps saying this to me. Is it true? That's what you want to try and create. And then they will learn to manage their phone. And you won't have to be this external locus of control. You create internal locus of control.
It's so much to unpack. I feel like we can bring you back for another, a full day workshop to really have these brave conversations. And I think these brave conversations with our children, I'm even noticing in myself getting a little bit uncomfortable that like, wow, I still have a few years for that. But I know even my son, he totally mimics. And now literally just the other day, he says, Mama, I don't really like it when you're on your phone. And I said, okay, well, how does it make you feel? Well, it makes me feel sad and mad. And so it was like, okay, we're going to have this conversation. And so I'm not supposed to be then, working and doing all the things on my phone or like having these parameters. So it's really humanizing a lot of the things that we're all going through right now.
We're in the same position. And, you raised something there so valid, that the feeling thing, we have so much emphasis. And I'm so glad that you said it, because I wanted to remember to say this. I love the example you gave, and it's fantastic. Now, he said, I feel mad and I feel sad. We're in an era currently where schools, media, books, psychologists, etc., are telling people to talk about your feelings. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen as scientists is that if you just talk about your feelings, and this is a huge part of my work, you're going to open a hornet's nest and make things worse. Mm-hmm. So you can't just say, I feel. Do you remember when I described the NeuroCycle? I said
the 5
feelings and behaviors. So feeling never lives alone. So if I feel that way, where do I feel that in my body? I feel mad and sad. Where do you feel it in your body? My tummy's sore, or my shoulders are tight, or I feel jiggly, whatever. What is it going to make you do? Well, it's going to make me kick something and break something because I want your attention. And does this happen often? Do you feel like this, does this sort of perspective, or you can have a box of sunglasses, broken ones, pretty ones, whatever, and you can say, show me how this makes you look at at the world. Pick up the sunglasses, and your child will probably pick up a broken pair of sunglasses and say, it makes me look at the world where it's not clear. And that's a great way of them saying it's such a great tool. I give lots of those kinds of examples in here, having boxes of sunglasses for things. And then, so in other words, do that. Then say, okay, why did that make you feel like that? Okay, let's draw that. You can do the neurocycle in 2 minutes. You can take that, it doesn't have to be 5 hours, but you can. So in other words, what you've done is you've taught your child to do a full cycle. If you just feel, you haven't hooked them with the other 3 signals, you haven't gone through the full process. So you've opened a can of worms. And what we've seen from the research is that we bring things up and then they go back worse than before. So instead of a resolution, you have increased levels of anger, increased levels of sadness, and increased behavioral issues the next time because it wasn't resolved. Kind of like when you fly a plane. If a pilot isn't taught how to prepare the plane's going to have problems. Then if the pilot doesn't know how to take off, the pilot will crash. If the pilot doesn't know how to fly, the pilot will crash. If the pilot doesn't know how to land, the pilot will crash. The pilot needs to know the whole lot. What we're doing by just naming feelings is all we're doing is preparing the plane and going nowhere, or we are preparing the plane and taking off and crashing.
I love this analogy.
It's
the full 5 process neurocycle. Is what you're talking about. And that we can get from both your book, which is How to Help Your Child Clean Up Their Mental Mess, a guide to building resilience and managing mental health. I think everyone should pick this up. And
Brainy Toy.
And Brainy the Brain Toy. I'm adding this to our little cool down corner. And
cool down corners. He walks the mental health journey with you. So
it's the best. And your app, which I know that we're gonna link it in the show notes. NeuroCycle. And before we let you go, we do a little something where we spill the chai, but for the sake of time, it'll just be 2 questions. All right. The first one is gentle parenting versus helicopter parenting versus the traditional classical parenting.
Can I add in what I think is the best, which is safety net parenting?
Sure. I knew you were going to have your own.
Sorry. Think of a circus, think of an acrobat, think of how there's all the ladders and the different levels and how they will climb to one level and swing and whatever, catch each other, and then they go to another level. And at the bottom, there's the safety net. This is safety net parenting. You have to let your child climb up to that level and jump and fly and fall. You're there to catch. You can't go up the ladder with them. You can't jump with them. They will never, ever learn, never develop resilience, and will just be battlings for the rest of their life. So you've got to let them fall, and you can be there, and the safety net is where you then walk through the NeuroCycle process.
Safety net parenting. Golden. This is brilliant, Dr. Caroline. And then finally, one word that describes this season of life.
Exciting.
Thank you so much. You are such a gift, and I'm just so beyond honored our community got to experience you. We're going to have to bring you back again for part 2.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you, and thank you for your great questions.
Oh my gosh, of course. And then where can everybody follow you? Where's the best place to check all of the offerings that you have?
Thank you. My social media handles, Dr. Caroline Leaf, webpage, drleaf.com. All this is available. These things are available on my website, drleaf.com. Books are available, as you know, wherever books are sold. The NeuroCycle app is available, iTunes, Google Play, and we have a web version. So,
amazing.
Go.
All right. Until next time on the Brave Table. Welcome back to the other side. All right. What did you think of the episode? She is so brilliant, so wise. I mean, being a mama of 4, and I wanted to also share, if you're curious about the NeuroCycle app, I think it's phenomenal and it's brilliant that she's been able to put this all in an app if that is your thing. I think it's one of those things that we actually really need in terms of having our own cycles, especially when we are going through things either at work or in the middle of our day, or we have an argument with somebody and we need to safely regulate. Go ahead and grab it. It is linked in the show notes. You can also follow Dr. Caroline Leaf. I actually love her Instagram lives. She's just such a calming voice to listen to. And you can grab her book and all of her other books, How to Help Your Child Clean Up Their Mental Mess, Build Resilience, and Manage Their Mental Health. You can grab it on Amazon. It is also linked for you at drleaf.com for all of her books if you wanted to get Brainy and the coloring books. All of the merch is there for you to explore, along with 19 of her other books. And if you loved this episode, go ahead, leave us a comment on YouTube, watch us together on YouTube, as well as follow us on Spotify and or iTunes. And if this really hit home or maybe changed your perspective on perhaps ADHD and or anxiety in our children, then go ahead and tell us how you feel at the Brave Table. Go ahead and follow us there on Instagram or tag me in your stories at Neeta Bhushan. Would so love that. And for this month, we are giving away signed books for free. All you have to do is send us your 5-star review. Go ahead and screenshot it and submit it to support@globalgrit.co. That is support@globalgrit.co. You have to be in the US to receive your book, and we will send it out to you. And that is obviously until supplies last. So go ahead. What are you waiting for? Thank you so, so much for tuning in week after week. And don't forget to do something just a little bit more brave for yourself this week, this weekend, today, and I will see you next time.